Tom Cosgrove. I'm joined by my two colleagues in this same room. We figured it was easier to play musical chairs than it was to share computers. So we're talking about our program at the Leysin American School called the EDGE program. We'll step you through some of our history and thoughts about how we came up with this, but we're hoping that you'll learn a bit more about how we are teaching student agency on purpose at our school. We thought it fit well with the title of the NEASC conference, Engaged by Learning. Our students in our classes are very engaged, and we're intentionally trying to target their engagement through teaching them in this way. So a little bit about us, if I can get this clicked over. I'm a math teacher originally, and I'm teaching coding and STEM at the moment. Paul is the educational research director at the Leysin American School, and Sky is our design arts teacher. She's joined us from, where were you before? Everywhere. She's been around the world, but she's come back to her hometown in Leysin, and you'll hear from her shortly. So I'm going to hand it over to Paul for our introduction.
Hi, so I hope you don't mind the musical chairs. Thanks for being here. Just a quick warm up. We actually borrowed some slides from Tim Logan. He's a friend of ours, someone that we've worked with here and had as a visiting scholar. He has a super podcast if you want to check that out. But he shared some of his slides. So you're going to see some slides that have been from different events, but just as a fun little warm up. In the chat, you can guess either who said this or what year you think this might have been said. In the chat, when do you think this was said? Who might have said this? And I'm not looking at the chat myself. I'm just going to give you a second to share out. You can see if anybody gets about the year this happened. Someone thinking reform might be a good idea in 1580. It's not like what we're proposing is new. It's not like we don't know, especially those of us who have come to a conference like this, that there is room for improvement in our practice. Here, books are going to be obsolete. The system is going to completely change. That's very optimistic. Somebody hoping. That was in 1913, Thomas Edison. That's over 100 years ago now. I don't know how much. I mean, schools have definitely changed, but I don't know how much in the way that he was thinking of there. Here's a recent quote. Sometimes the most brilliant and intelligent minds aren't standardized, right? This is from Diane Ravitch. I worked in public policy with education for a long time. She was a big one for us to follow. And someone you all know who recently died. And he also put in a very impassioned plea for change. And in fact, I think his YouTube video is one of the most watched. Ken Robinson in 2006. There's room for change. There's time for change. But how do we actually do it? Where are the examples? Here's something much more recent from the IB conference 2 years ago. Can you think of who might have said this? Someone also with a terrific, some that I'm not up to speed with, Will Richardson. Now, Will said 2 years ago, right, we're witnessing the most profound educational shift ever. I don't know how much of that is aspiration, how much of that is real. On a recent podcast with Tim Logan, in fact, Will said, and perhaps correctly, he said, you know, maybe it's going to take even more than a pandemic to get us to change, right? So we're up against it when we want to change. When we listen to, for those of you who listened to Tony Wagner at the beginning today, when we listen to that, it resonates, right? That's we're all like, yes. But in the chat that followed, in the discussion time with Tony, that the all the concerns are there that we hear over and over, like what will the universities think, or we've all learned, how do we move on? How do we get past that? We think what we have for you here today is a little bit of example of how to get past that. Here's one last quote. It allows me to progress in the topics I'm interested in. It allows me to move at my own pace. This is why I'm always motivated and interested in this class. And sure enough, that was one of our own students that we were doing a little research this fall, one of our students from EDGE. Okay, so what is Edge? Here's a short video. This was produced before the program started, but it's mostly accurate.
So the EDGE program is a new program at LAS. It's a 2-year cycle where students will be engaging heavily in certain fields that they choose. There are 4 different pillars. Over that course of time, they'll delve deeply into that aspect and they'll end up with a degree at the end.
When we came up with EDGE, we were looking at ways to make education here at LAS something a little bit special. What we wanted to do was take classical education and enhance it by offering the skills that students are going to need.
So the Da Vinci Lab is about invention, developing your own solutions to novel problems that exist in the world. If you're someone that's tired of being told what to do and told what to study and told what you need to learn in order to be a productive citizen of the future, and you want to work with your own strengths and develop the skills that are going to be useful right away, something like Da Vinci Lab might be an interesting place to propel you into that.
Well, the Alpine Institute fits beautifully within the EDGE program because students who are already interested in the environment and engaging in the local mountains with adventure and science, they have a place where they can go and focus on that for 2 years.
One of the pillars that is being offered next year for the EDGE program is the Design and Performing Arts Conservatory. It focuses on the performing and visual arts. It is based off of more of a university conservatory course offering.
The Young Founders Incubator will focus on students creating businesses, products, services, or organizations for social change. Traditionally, schools have been really good at providing lots of content. But what we haven't been as good at is providing skills. And the skills that you need to really succeed anywhere, whether it's in a school or a business, any company, is the ability to work together as a good, strong team member.
One of the big things that we wanted to address with EDGE is the fact that 20 years from now, we don't know what the world or the workforce is going to look like. We don't know what the jobs are going to be in 20 years. But by equipping them with the skills to get there, we can help shape the future.
All right, in a year and a half, I can already notice we've thank you. What do you do?
So the EDGE program is a new program at
So in a year and a half, we've come a ways in our understanding of what we wanted to do with EDGE. It didn't come out of it didn't just appear one day, right? So 5-6 years ago, we started in the afternoons with activities where we were able to have much more flexibility with the curriculum, because in an activity, it's traditionally not graded. Maybe it's a here or not here kind of grade, but it's not graded, it's open, it's flexible. The activity office is pleased if anybody steps in and does something. I had that great teacher experience just last week when a student from that first year wrote. He was actually asking for a letter of reference, but he wrote and said he was actually a homeschooled student who was visiting us in the afternoons. He wrote that he had never opened a math book. He was very much on his own, what he wanted to do. And through being with us in the afternoon, where he was invited to work on anything that he wanted to, he actually discovered math. He worked with one of our teachers and has now decided to study math. So this is what we're looking for, right? As teachers, we want the kids to take it on and love it and discover what they want to do. And that's a little bit of Marcel's story. That first year of activities led us into creating a middle school. And I get to exit here, stage left.
So the first year I worked at LAS was the first year we started this middle school program. It was designed to be its own kind of part of the school with some special twists on education that we weren't able to offer in other areas. So we had grade 7 and 8 students they were in traditional core classes of English, math, science. And then we had these exploration classes. And in those exploration classes was where we were able to experiment and try a bunch of new ideas and concepts. We pulled in some of the ideas from the agile world, typically reserved for IT and things like that, but we thought there was some value in there. We had seen some other people trying it in education. So we tried to pull those into the exploration classes as well as the middle school in general. We were going for more of a summer camp feel, and we were trying to focus on giving students agency in their learning. So that's the kind of second stage from the activities piece. And then we moved towards our first year of this EDGE program, which Sky is going to talk about.
Good morning. I was privileged to be part of the first real classified EDGE program year at LES last year. And I was involved with the visual art and design program. I had about 12 students in my class. And the first thing that we gave ourselves permission to do was to take grading out of the equation. So it brought the stress level down from students, but it actually pushed the productivity up in their engagement in the courses because they weren't worried about their grade and we weren't giving them a timeline beyond their own timeline. They engaged, and every class you come into my room, nobody was sitting bored on their phone. They jumped in immediately. They got their art supplies out. They knew they were rushed to clean up at the end instead of everybody stop, stop, stop. So it was quite a break from my traditional art classes. We had the theater, musical theater group. Alpine Institute was more focused on outward bound, going into the forest, being involved in snow, being involved in tracking animals, doing night vision cameras and some forest places. Da Vinci Lab was an inventor space that we created for last year, and it's going supremely this year. And Young Founders Incubator was more of a business project development class where students were able to come up with their own business plans and push them forward into the real world and go for broke. If they had a good idea, it was successful. If they didn't, it's not. And now continuing forward, those students are still wanting to continue with their business plans or amending it to make it better, which in today's world with students, many of them will become business partners in the world and have to start their own businesses or follow in their family's footsteps. So it's a real life situation that they can really embrace. This is a little bit of an example with, let me just press play here on a student talking about being in my art class versus being in the EDGE class. Whoa, where did it go?
I think that the difference between art class and EDGE class is that in art class, I work in projects that we do as a class together, and in EDGE class, I'm allowed to express my creativity by projects that I do by myself. I like EDGE class better because it allows me to do different things, and I can work on whatever I want most of the time, so I feel more free to express myself in different ways, not only drawing, but I get to do sculptures with clay or painting. And
so there's a wider variety of materials and sources that I would have never pre-taught to a class because I didn't know a student was interested in it. So if they say I want to do clay, how do I do pottery? I can show them how to do pots. I can show them how to do printmaking. Versus on the left side, we're doing, pre-planned projects, which come out veritably the same. The most important part about doing a course like this is having them schedule their own time, block their own time. How many classes do you think this is going to take? And how do you move forward when you're stuck? Do you get feedback, or do you let it die, or do you keep moving forward? So it's really important that the kids are learning that skill of time management and reflection. Next, back to Tom.
So I also switched over from teaching middle school to this EDGE program because I liked a lot of the things that we were doing in the middle school at the time, and I wanted to shift my teaching into this realm also. So in our second year, we started this year in the second year of the EDGE program, and we added some new courses. They're on the right side there: coding, engineering, piano, rock school. We were still focused on our goal of giving students the power to choose what they wanted to learn. Some of the main successes were that we were able to increase the volume of people that were involved. So we had more students, more teachers involved, and the program was growing. We were still kind of working on our working up the kinks from the previous year. So the success of the last year and the changes we wanted to make, we followed through with those, and we were making those as we went this year. Some of the things we still need to consider are how do we, by giving students so much autonomy and some putting all the responsibility on them, how do we make sure that they are still accountable for their work? The other thing we're working on is trying to still be a little less formal with the program. Originally we made students apply and things like that, but we thought this program should be available for anyone that wants it, and we've been able to expand to students outside of the application kind of process. We also moved away from the 2-year system where students would do year 1 and year 2. We thought anybody can kind of come in and pick it up in year 1. There's no 2-year cycle like we mentioned in the video. So those are some of the main changes. If we look at my thinking in a kind of what I thought before as a teacher and what I'm thinking now, I was always thinking like, okay, if we do a project, we all have to do the same project. But now I'm shifting over towards students choosing their own, and everybody can work on a different one. I'm also letting students learn the skills as they need them. So for my classes in the STEM program, if a student wants to learn how to 3D print, I don't need to teach that to them formally. They will learn it as they need it because they're interested, hopefully, motivated by that. Finishing a project and then moving on, I was, here's the deadline and we need to finish and move on. But I'm now more on letting students decide when the project is due, when they think they're finished. So everybody might be finishing at a different time, and that's okay. Students are now motivated in my classes by choosing their own project. And I've realized that, we don't necessarily need grades for students to be motivated. And I think the students appreciate that also. So this is a photo from my class last week. We had a showcase similar to the one at High Tech High, where we invite some people. This was a small scale. We just invited a few classes up and kids could show their projects. I asked for some reflections, and you'll hear my question at the start of it. And this is 2 students in this style of class. And then the second one was students in grade 9 and 10. This is a grade 11 and 12 class. Okay, so I'm interested in knowing how this class is different than your other classes at school.
I think first thing that's very noticeable about it is simply the freedom. You have the choice to choose what you want to work on, as long as it's within the terms of engineering. You can work on something that's personal interest. You can work on something that maybe you're interested in learning more about. And it also allows you to be much more motivated on the work you're doing, as you're not being told to do it, but you work on it yourself. Obviously, there's no guidelines, meaning it can be something, I guess, challenging and difficult, but I think it's a very interesting and intriguing part of the class, as it teaches you to make your own challenges and overcome them yourself, and not necessarily be told by the teacher what to do exactly.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's easier to apply to real life, as you can kind of be interested in and investigate that and create solutions to problems you're working on, like that.
In life, you'll never be really told what to do unless you're working a day job. If you want to do something more, you always be like, oh, what do I do? won't be someone higher up telling you what exactly to do. So this class kind of allows you to practice that of creating your own challenges and creating your own like goals to achieve.
Yeah, it's much more applicable to life and less likely the job you're going to have in the future.
Okay, and this is my second group in a separate class. So I'm interested, because you guys are in two of my classes, I just wanted to know how this class is different than your other courses that you take in school.
More freedom. Makes me more willing to do anything, really.
Yeah, in both of the classes we get to decide the projects we work on, so it makes it so we pick things we enjoy working on and actually get work done and don't complain about it.
And that's it. And don't complain about it. Okay, we have a couple more videos from students in our grade 11 and 12 class.
Okay, so I got a question for you. So what do you think about the way we're going about doing this class?
I like it because I don't feel like you're pressuring me to like do work.
Do you think you'd be learning more if I were pressuring you?
No.
No? Okay, sometimes I wonder about that. And do you think you're learning skills that will transfer from piano class to anything else?
Yes.
Like what?
Like my homework, like I know that I have to do it, you know, so like I can like learn from myself how to like work without like somebody telling me like you need to do this, you need to do this.
Excellent. Okay, thanks.
And one more.
This class like is different than other class because like you must work on your own.
Yeah, and is it working for you?
Yeah, for me it works. But for many students it doesn't work.
It doesn't work as well. And what's the difference?
The difference
Between it working for you and not working for some others?
Because like it depends. If you like playing piano, if you really like it, then you can do it on your own.
Yeah.
But like others, maybe they don't like as much as I do, so they don't work.
Okay, they don't have the motivation.
Yeah.
Sorry if it was hard to hear, but that's the idea too, that the class is able to step aside and answer questions and then go back to what they're working on. They do have quite a lot of freedom in these courses.
This class like is different than
So regarding student feedback, you just heard from 6 or 7 sources, but I think an interesting concept is that because they're choosing their own format and their own discipline of what they're truly interested in, music, business, getting out there in the world into real topics. I've had a few students that apparently were not successful in other classes. And one boy in particular, he has dyslexia and he really is not a high functioning student in the core classes. And Edge has just made him blossom. He's like, oh, I want to design a skateboard ramp. How do I access to, you know, and then he's making videos, his extremes, and he's adding all these different layers to his learning to show that he is a learner. Another girl from one of the previous slides, she, her artwork, it turns out that she has test anxiety and all this other anxiety when it comes to book and reading and writing, memorizing. And I didn't know that about her as a student until the end of the year, because she was one of my highest flyers. She was one of my highest achieving students. And she just came to my class every day, shiny faced, ready to go, ready to take on the world. And it's all because she was in a course that motivated her intrinsically. Then we come to teacher feedback, because is this really working for teachers? Obviously, I teach 4 other classes along with Edge. Tom teaches other classes. Paul teaches other classes. And fortunately, we can't just teach Edge all day, although that would be amazing So one of my comments was that from teaching is hard. It's hard to step back and let kids learn and fall all over themselves and know when to ask for help. And that silence, that non-space that you think they're in, is actually them twisting and turning and finding out, how do I get that knowledge? Because in core classes, they're given the knowledge, whether they like it or not, in the same kind of way on your whiteboard with a projector, from the textbook, whatever. And when it comes to learning in this way, they have to find the source of the knowledge that they want. And that is the life skill that we're teaching them, is how do you learn, besides Googling, something that you need to learn. And I'm a resource. Mr. Cosgrove is a resource. Mr. Magnuson is a resource. How can you go outside of the four walls that we're in to help yourself learn? And it's really been a growing experience for all of these students, and the life skill that they will take with them into their next steps.
Yeah, the quote on the bottom was mine also. We talked about this as a group of teachers, like what are we noticing in these courses compared to our other classes? And when I student kind of unlimited options, they would choose things that I didn't know, and they would never ask me like, well, how do I do this? Because they knew that I didn't know that particular topic, maybe, but they knew that I could point them in the right direction to solve those problems. So the pressure was off me to know everything because they chose it themselves. And then it was also on them to learn as much as they wanted about it, because it was up to them to choose it. I wasn't limiting their knowledge on what I already knew in those classes. Also, because we were eliminating the grade aspect, I wanted to make my the parents of the students that we teach at a boarding school, so the parents aren't here. But I wanted to make sure we had some sort of like ongoing communication from us. And one of the ways was every semester we need to write comments. So I wrote those comments, I put them in Power School, but then I also sent them in an email to the parents of these students. These are some of the replies I got back, which was good. I won't read through, you know, that rekindling their interest, encouraging free thinking skills, another one about freedom to let the students do what he or she wants. I didn't have any parents email me back and say, this is a terrible idea, I don't want this for my kid, right? So they really liked the idea of giving their students some freedom, giving them the space to learn something that they were interested in. And that was good. The last quote is my favorite because it says, that this student really liked the way the Lord teaches him, and I guess it was just a bad translation, but I took it like right to heart. I thought it was good. But yeah. Anyways, I just thought I'd throw that one in there. I've also been connected a bit with the NEASC accreditation and the ACE protocol. I recently did a virtual visit to Zurich, although it was still in Switzerland. I did it virtually. And the whole time I was thinking about how I teach and how it relates to these learning principles. Again, I won't go through them all, but I feel like the EDGE program really ticks a lot of these, not ticks the box. The learning principles really match well with what we are doing in the EDGE program. It maybe doesn't match so well with some of our other traditional core classes, but our goal is that we try and push students in this direction. So, you know, we're able to explore topics, we're valuing skills over content, we are encouraging them to take risks and choose things that they might not necessarily go out on a limb and choose themselves unless they're given this free space in the school. Also, they're in control, so we're giving them more of the power back in a way. We're not controlling what they need to do. They can give us ideas and make suggestions on how we can change things. We're always looking for feedback from them. And they're given this time to explore at a pace that they find reasonable. They go deeply into these topics, and I think that helps with the way that we've designed, or the way that we've designed it helps facilitate that. So this is our last question. I'll hand it back over to Sky.
So our question for you today is, how can you stop teaching and still have kids learn from you, from their situation, from your school, from your location, from the country you're in, from the adults available, from the peers that are available? How can you support student agency tomorrow in your classroom, as a principal, as a dorm head? How can this enter into your new equation, your new way of thinking today, right now? You go home at the end of the day, you have class tomorrow. What can you implement that will give students the rope that they need to feel empowered to learn by themselves with your mentorship? So if you want to add up any of your comments into the chat, we can read through those and help you answer them.
I think Jay will curate, Jay, if you want to, and then
yeah,
we're happy to.
thanks so much, Tom and Sky and Paul. So there have been a number of very interesting questions. So the first question is, how do you integrate the Leysin core program with the EDGE program? Or do you try to integrate it, or are they separate programs for the kids?
So one way that we were visibly able to integrate it is to have a, we called it Globe Day last year. This year it'll be Earth Expo, where we're providing the students a venue to help to share out all of their newfound ideas, their new programs. On it was in the gym floor, open stage, open booth. So students were able to showcase and present. I think the most important is being able to present and use those presentation skills throughout all of their core programs. When they're more open to presenting several times a year, several times showing, sharing out, speaking up and about their program and what they've been learning, then those are all skills that are going to relate back to their core classrooms. If a student is learning iMovie and he chooses to use an iMovie instead of writing an essay, then we've won the battle of integrating it back into the core classes. We've also been having discussions lately about how could we also have an EDGE math class? How could we have an EDGE science class? Could this be all of 9-10 EDGE? You know, in an ideal world, you would want this to take over a school. So slowly we're gaining momentum, and it's becoming a snowball that more and more kids are super involved and eager to join this session and keep going with into more of their classes.
Yeah, thanks very much, Sky. So one of the questions was, do you find that there may be students who are not easily turned into self-motivating learners? That is, have you had kids in the programs who just didn't respond to this sort of structure? And if so, how did you work with them? Or is the program self-selecting, so the kids who might have those kinds of challenges don't get into the program in the first place? I guess the question is, how universally applicable have you found this, Tom?
Yep, you can see Sky and I switch places. The Sky wasn't leaving right in the middle of the question.
All of my kids love my program.
Of course. Well, like you heard the one piano student say, this works really good for me, but not for some other students, right? So what I thought of when I was watching that video here in the background is that the program then is actually less needed for him. He can just enjoy the program, but it is actually needed for those students who struggle with it. So if a student comes to a class that's self-organized like this and requires them to be self-organized, but they can't do it, right? That is actually our target student. We want to figure out what we can do with that student. It doesn't mean that we're successful with all of them. We started the first year by having it be a competitive process. They had to actually do a little performance of building together as a team and collaborating. And then we watched them, we videoed them, and the team afterwards and went through all of the student names to decide who we would take in the program, because we wanted to hedge our bets. It was a new program. We wanted to have the absolute best students that we thought would be successful. Then in their second year now, and for us, COVID was a big disruptor. Like everybody, it was also a little bit of an opportunity because we were able to find out that we could offer this to all students and get more students in. I think students should have this experience. I think some of them are going to find out that they're no good at it. That is more of an indictment of how we have run education in general than of the students themselves. If we've held their hand and tried to fill every instructional minute for them all the time, it's no surprise that when we pull that away, they don't know what to do, right? So yes, it's a little hard for some students. It's good for those students that it's hard. It would be nice to have even more of a safety net. It would be nice to have an alternative class at the same time that they could move into if this just wasn't for them. But like many schools, we have, you know, the schedule is complicated and some students fit here and there, and then some students need to have a certain course and we have a hard time finding where to put them otherwise. So we deal with some of that. The successes though with those students that at first don't get it and then do later are huge. I've written quite a bit about this because it's interesting to ask yourself, how long do you let a student struggle in this environment? How long is that productive struggle, and when does it just become struggle? And we definitely had students last year who took more than a semester before they came around and said like, oh, I get it. It's like, you're not going to step in and tell me what to do. I got to figure it out myself. Those for us are some of the hugest successes, right? The student who just starts off right from the beginning, like that one piano student, he was on it from day one. It's successful for him. Education should be that way then for him because he can handle it. But it's not the same kind of success as a student who can't do it and learns over the course of the year to be able to.
Tom, I know you mentioned a little bit about, I wanted just to return to one of the words that you used, which was schedule. How is this program scheduled into the day of the kids at Leysin?
Yeah, it's just a regular class that they take. So we have like a block schedule, A to I don't even know what letter, H. So we just take one of those letters, those blocks up, and it's a class that they would take as normal in the day from 8 till 3:30.
And have you had any scheduling complexities around that? Sometimes kids have a particular kind of program that doesn't lend or lead them to having free blocks in particular points in their schedule. Just wondered how big is Leysin, so people have a sense of the size of the school.
Sure. Yeah, we have 300 students, grade 7 to 12. It's 11 and 12 heavy in IB diploma years. The course I introduced this year in that grade 11 and 12 section of the campus, it's during one of those blocks that they required. They had a lot of students that didn't have a class, so they said, okay, we're going to introduce this new course, and I pitched this new course to them, so it fit well there for a group of students that were missing a class. So in a way, it's actually been more beneficial instead of a restraint. We also run these classes during the same blocks, like similar times. So a lot of our edge classes are running at the same time, so that kids could flexibly go back.
So, Tom, another question that was asked is, has the school done any follow-up with the kids who have been through the program? Maybe kids who have graduated and gone on to university. Has there been any, and I realize it's a very young program, so there may not be an enormous amount of follow-up, but I guess the question really is, what kind of lingering effects are you seeing among the kids who have taken this program, not only in their work in the school, but perhaps beyond the school, where they are now in their educational journey? Yeah,
I mean, I love seeing the middle school kids that I taught in grade 7 and 8 now in grade 11 and 12. We did start this in grade 9 and 10 last year, so those edge kind of students haven't kind of gone through grade 11, or sorry, gone through grade 12 yet. But yeah, we've asked, what are the main ones I'm thinking of? The entrepreneur students from last year. in their course. We offered the coaching model to continue their project if they wanted. We're also hoping that a lot of the skills that they've learned in this course are helping them with IB courses, and I think some of the feedback we got from them was positive in that end. The one story that jumps out at me is the student I taught in grade 8, and now I'm teaching in grade 12 in this Edge class that I'm teaching at that campus. She was super shy and quiet, and now she's really like way more outgoing. I was explaining to her like, hey, I want to give you the ownership to choose your own project because I think that'll motivate you more. And she looked at me and went, ah, that's pretty smart of you. Like, well done. But I was still trying to get that across to her in grade 8, but she didn't quite get it until now in grade 12. But it's good to see those kids kind of transition through. We do have a lot of turnover at our school, so we're always bringing in new students, but they integrate really quickly with this program, and we hope that when they go to their own school in their own country that's transferable.
Yeah, it raises another very interesting question, Tom, which is, do you find students in school that you would really like to see in this program? In other words, are there kids that you would counsel into the program as you're talking about their 4 or 5 year schedule at the school?
Okay, Sky's gonna ask. She's just jumping up and down.
So I actually had 2 students this year in my design and digital media class that's using Photoshop and iMovie and product production. And in talking with them, I found out that one was super into music production and the other one was super he's going to take over his father's steel company or something. And I said, well, why aren't you in the Edge program? Why aren't you, exploring this further in a domain where you have to make your own choices and make your own successes in producing music and in the Edge Music program or in the Young Founders Incubator. And now the school has given them permission to jump ship of their first semester classes and actually dive right in after winter break. So I think that flexibility needs to be in there, where if a kid shows potential of like that drive of independence, that we need to foster it and listen for those interests, because as core classes, often we don't listen for their interests. We just teach over them, we teach to them, we teach at them, and we are not listening for who these children are all the time. We have to remind ourselves, listen for what they need, for what they want, for what they're going to be in the future.
I was going to say that middle school kids.
Two of my middle school artists kind of eloped and went to his Da Vinci Lab class mid-course because they found it super interesting, and we weren't quite prepared to let them join it yet, but they will be definitely in the class in winter because they just couldn't get enough. Our room shares a window, and they were peeking in and couldn't get enough of what Tom was doing in his class. So it's an amazing ebb and flow of watching students and feeding their need to learn. They want to learn. They want to be in this. They want to be interested in why they're here to study. You just have to listen for it. Let them
So Sky,
do it.
this also leads to another interesting question. How are you, Tom and Paul, how are you working with the other faculty? Because it sounds as though you really have found a way of reaching the kids, which is unique. And how are you working with other members of the Leysin faculty to perhaps bring them some of the techniques and approaches which you found effective in the Edge program?
Yeah, if you want to, Paul, or I mean, I can talk to this because I just 2 hours before this meeting, I had similar to the showcase that they mentioned at High Tech High, we're trying to bring people, and similar to the showcase I showed my photo of, we're trying to invite classes and administrators or people that work in the office, cleaners if they want to come and hang out. We're trying to invite all these people to come and see what's happening. So I prepared my students for this the visit that we had today, and I said, we're going to have some guests come in, some were the marketing reps, some were other teachers that had a free block, and I said, come in, we'll have a student teach you some coding, and you can sit beside them and learn on your computer how to do whatever. So that was one way, is like bring them into the room, show them what's going on, show them some of the projects that the kids have, and then maybe they can start thinking, like maybe asking us for advice, or maybe just thinking of how they can implement a similar program into their classroom. I mean, ideally we would invite the whole community, the whole town, but at the moment we can't. We do that with some of those days where we try and do this kind of expo, science fair thing, where we dedicate a whole day to it. But it's only once, maybe twice a year if we can get away with it. But yeah, that's the goal, is to show it in action in real time with the kids, working on.
And so the corollary question would I guess it would be a question in the negative. Do you get pushback from some faculty, or some faculty who feel like this is a program without enough borders or enough discipline in it, and they wouldn't want to adopt it because it doesn't seem like it's rigorous enough? Is that have you had those kinds of comments or concerns from other members of the faculty?
Yeah, I mean, we've discussed pushing it into the other realms of other subjects, and it's harder to do at the grade 11 and 12 realm. That's why we've targeted, that's why we started with middle school, was that we had a lot more freedom and flexibility in that realm. And that's why we've stuck now with the grade 9 and 10 area, because we have less rigid curriculum than they do at grade 11 and 12. I still do, that being said, I still teach a class to the grade 11 and 12 students, but they're non-IB students. So that's maybe where it fits better. This guy's gonna add.
Go behind. So also, I've taught IB art before, and knowing what I'm pushing up to, this type of teaching and learning and thinking on your own is exactly what IB art and other IB courses want from the students. Except in EDGE, we're making it more blatant. You have to think on your own. In IB art, there are a few, bullet points of landings that they have to get to and projects they have to do. But ultimately, it's a 2-year course that the students have to produce their own work. And if they've never done that from K until grade 11, then we've already failed them. If they've never produced anything on their own before. And that's what a lot of schools are going to. They're pushing their kids up to IB or up to AC, other standardized exams, APs, whatever. And they've never had the freedom to think on their own to make that type of project.
And
yeah, we don't get a huge amount of pushback from teachers, I don't think. They're quite supportive of the skills we're trying to get across the students.
And Tom, you may have said this earlier, and I apologize if I missed it, but is there a forum or some sort of formal process where the kids make a presentation of their own projects? And would they do that to an audience that would be just the EDGE kids, or a wider audience in the whole school?
At the moment, it's pretty informal. We've, like I said, I invited staff and students to come to me. We haven't made it a big thing. What was I going to say? We've asked them to make an online portfolio, so that could be shared with a wider audience. That's another piece that we've introduced this year, a little more formally. Those days where we have dedicated time to show their work, that's a kind of formal pitch. I have some ideas for projects in my design and technology, like my Da Vinci Lab class, where they make an invention, kind of innovator day style, and then they have to pitch it to a panel. So we have little pieces built in. We kind of prefer the informality of it, because the kids kind of get stressed out, and they prefer talking to their friends or just a few teachers, not a huge auditorium full. So we've kept it minimal at the moment, but there's scope.
And if you just thinking ahead about, do you have dreams or aspirations for this program within the school? Do you see it expanding? Do you see more teachers joining in? Have you got a strategic plan for where you'd like to see this go in the years ahead?
Yeah, we originally had a slide on here, year 3, and we deleted it because we thought, we'll probably come up in the chat anyway. So Paul will talk about that. I'll let him. He's He's the
happy to. The rigor question is quite interesting. The and your last question is quite interesting. If there's pushback, and there is some pushback. I feel like what I've been doing for the last years for this program and then earlier for the middle school is cheerleading to make sure that that we do internal PR and external PR both. So keeping parents informed about what we're doing and why we're doing it, and then keeping staff. And there's definitely some feeling, maybe just from the teacher next door or all the way up to a board member, where that feeling of we don't quite get this program, so what are you really trying to do, and so on. And yes, rigor comes up because it can look like it's not very rigorous if the students are trying to work through the fact that they can't get their project started and they're kind of bouncing from one thing to the next. A casual observer would say, oh, they're off task and they're wasting time. I've taken to calling that slack, and I argue that it's an absolute necessity to have some slack in the curriculum so that students learn what to do with slack, not that we hold their hands through one activity after another, after another, after another. But that wasn't really your question. Your question was third year, what are we going to do, third and beyond? We are actually changing for next year. We're broadening it out. We'd like to either say that a couple of our periods, we have A through H periods, we'd like to either say that anything that happens in G and H periods, that's usually around lunchtime, that all of those are EDGE classes. And what defines EDGE is that it's not graded, that it's student driven, that the curriculum isn't known beforehand, that they are self-paced, and that they have a lot of the slack that I just mentioned. That'd be one way to do it. Another way to do it would be to say certain types of classes that lend themselves, makerspace, entrepreneurship, art, music, there's many, right? That those certain types of classes are EDGE, or that any elective is taught as an EDGE class. The concern I have moving forward is that if it's rigid like that, but it always, that we've defined when we can be teaching EDGE-like, my concern is that the message will be that when you get to a serious class like science or math, right, then boom, EDGE is out the, self-directed learning, self-paced, that's all out the window because now we're serious. And that's where I'm afraid we have to do some pretty clever thinking on our part not to be reestablishing some sort of myth that you have to be teacher-fronted, teacher-led in certain areas, otherwise it's not for real. I just always think back to the middle school. We do research after our programs. After the first 2 years in the middle school, we met with the 8th graders who had moved on to 9th grade in October. So the following October, after they were not in middle school anymore. The most common, and it's still ringing in my ears, the most common thing that the student said was, well, now I'm in serious school because there's tests that I can't redo and so on, right? And there was homework that was like too much in the evening. So I thought, oh my God, all the stuff that I don't want to be espousing, right? But they identified that as, now we're in serious school, thank goodness. So there is still work to be done, right? We're in the minority.
Yeah. Well, Tom and Paul and Sky, I would really like to thank you on behalf of all the folks who were part of this session. It was fascinating, stimulating, and I'm sure that people will carry away some EDGE thinking that they might bring into their own classes to see if they can, as our session is called, engaging students with their own learning. This couldn't be more on point. We want to thank you all for being part of this, and we want to thank Leysin School for opening the door to this kind of creative opportunity.